The message came on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything for the people of New Haven Colony. Ambassador Kelris stepped off his sleek Valyrian vessel with that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. The kind of smile that made your stomach turn even when you didn't know why yet. He gathered the colony council in the main hall, and his words were simple enough. The Valyrian Empire had been protecting humanity's outer colonies for years now, keeping the dangerous species at bay. But protection had a price, and that price had come due. They wanted a tribute. Not credits or resources this time. They wanted a daughter. She would be sent to Commander Vraxis of the Crithari Dominion, the so-called Dragon Lord whose scaled warriors had left burning ships and silent stations across a dozen systems. Nobody knew much about the Crithari except that they were big, they were deadly, and they didn't negotiate. The Valorians painted them as monsters who collected trophies from conquered worlds. One human girl in exchange for continued protection. Take it or leave it. The council had 1 week to decide. The panic started within hours. Every family with daughters suddenly found reasons to send them off-world for education or family visits. The wealthy ones called in favors, pulled strings, made donations to council members. Governor Patricia Hayes assured everyone that they would find a volunteer, someone who understood the greater good. But as the days ticked by, no volunteers appeared. That's when the council started looking at the colonists nobody would miss. Rebecca Foster had stopped expecting much from life 3 years ago. The reactor accident had seen to that. Half her face was a landscape of scar tissue, pink and white and tight. She'd been a pretty girl once, or so people told her. Now she was the woman people looked away from in the corridors, the engineer who worked the late shifts when fewer people were around to stare. Her parents, Daniel and Margaret Foster, had been climbing the social ladder on New Haven for 15 years. They hosted parties for council members, volunteered for committees, always knew the right people. Rebecca's accident had been an embarrassment they learned to work around. They stopped introducing her at gatherings. Started making excuses when people asked about their daughter. When council member James Burton suggested Rebecca as a candidate, her parents didn't even pretend to fight it. Margaret actually seemed relieved. Daniel talked about duty and sacrifice and the greater good, but he wouldn't meet Rebecca's eyes when he said it. Rebecca sat in the council chamber while they debated her fate like she wasn't even there. Governor Hayes tried to make it sound noble. This was diplomacy, she said. Building bridges between species. The chosen representative would be an ambassador for all humanity. But Rebecca could read between the lines. They were throwing her to a monster because nobody important would miss her. She could have refused. Could have run. But where would she go? Earth was 6 months away and she couldn't afford passage. The other colonies wouldn't take a refugee who dodged a council order. And some small, bitter part of her wanted to see what her parents would do if she said no. Would they finally fight for her? Finally choose her over their precious social standing? They didn't. When she looked at her mother during the vote, Margaret was checking her communication pad. The week passed in a blur. Rebecca packed her few belongings into a single bag. Her toolkit, because habits die hard and she couldn't imagine not having her tools. Some clothes. A photo of her grandmother, the only person who'd looked at her the same way after the accident. The night before she was supposed to leave, her mother knocked on her door. Rebecca almost didn't answer. When she did, Margaret stood in the hallway holding a small box. Inside was a necklace, nothing fancy, just a silver chain with a star pendant. It had belonged to Rebecca's grandmother. "I thought you might want this," Margaret said. She still couldn't look directly at Rebecca's face. Rebecca took the necklace but left the box. She didn't say thank you. Her father didn't come to say goodbye at all. The morning of departure, a small crowd gathered at the landing pad. Not to support Rebecca, but to witness the spectacle. To be able to say they'd been there when the sacrifice was made. Governor Hayes gave a speech about courage and duty. Rebecca didn't listen. The Crithari transport ship was nothing like human vessels. It was all sharp angles and dark metal that seemed to swallow light. The loading ramp extended with a hiss that sounded like something breathing. A Crithari soldier waited at the top. Rebecca had never seen one in person. He was massive, easily 8 feet tall, covered in dark green scales that caught the light like armor. His eyes were gold and slitted like a cat's. He didn't speak, just gestured for her to follow. Rebecca climbed the ramp with her bag over her shoulder and her toolkit in her hand. She didn't look back. There was nothing behind her worth looking at anymore. As the ramp closed and the ship lifted off, Rebecca pressed her scarred hand against the cold metal wall and wondered if dragons ate their tributes quickly or if they preferred to take their time. Either way, she figured it couldn't be worse than what she was leaving behind. The flight lasted 3 days, and Rebecca spent most of it alone in a small room that was surprisingly comfortable. She'd expected a cell, maybe chains, but instead she got a bed that adjusted to her body, walls that glowed with soft light, and a food dispenser that actually worked better than the one back on New Haven. The Krithari soldier who'd escorted her aboard brought meals twice a day, never speaking, just nodding before he left. She tried not to think about what waited at the end of the journey. When the ship finally docked, Rebecca felt it in her bones. The whole vessel shuddered and hummed as massive clamps locked into place. She stood up, straightened her jacket, and touched her grandmother's necklace for luck. Whatever happened next, she'd face it standing up. The same soldier came for her, but this time he spoke. His voice was deep and rumbling, like rocks grinding together, but his words were clear enough. Commander Vraxis will see you now. Follow. They walked through corridors that made human ships look like toys. Everything was built on a massive scale. The ceiling soared 30 feet above her head. Doorways were wide enough to drive a transport through. And everywhere she looked, Krithari crew members moved with purpose, their scales gleaming under the strange blue lighting. Some glanced at her curiously. Others ignored her completely. Nobody looked at her with pity or disgust. Nobody looked away from her scars. The soldier stopped at a set of doors that had to be 20 feet tall. They opened silently, and he gestured for her to enter alone. Rebecca's heart hammered as she stepped inside. The room was enormous, part office and part something else. One wall was entirely transparent, showing a view of space that took her breath away. She could see a massive station in the distance, covered in lights, with dozens of ships coming and going like insects around a hive. You are Rebecca Foster. She spun around. Commander Vraxis stood near a desk that was carved from a single piece of dark stone. He was bigger than the soldier who'd escorted her, maybe 9 feet tall, with scales that shifted between deep blue and purple depending on how the light hit them. His eyes were amber-colored and fixed on her with an intensity that should have been terrifying. But he wasn't snarling. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was just watching her with what looked like genuine curiosity. Yes, Rebecca managed. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I'm Rebecca. Vraxis tilted his head slightly, a gesture that reminded her of a cat examining something interesting. You are frightened. It wasn't a question, but Rebecca answered anyway. Wouldn't you be? Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Perhaps. The Valorians told us humans were sending an honored guest as a gesture of diplomacy. A representative to live among us and help build understanding between our species. But you arrive expecting death. Why? Rebecca blinked. Honored guest? They told you it was diplomacy? Was it not? Vraxis moved closer, and Rebecca fought the urge to step back. The translation was clear. A respected human female would join my household as a liaison. We accepted because the Krithari value such exchanges. It is how we build trust. They told us it was tribute, Rebecca said slowly. They said you demanded it as payment. They said you were the Dragon Lord who terrorized a dozen systems. Vraxis went very still. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. The Valorians have creative interpretations of truth. He gestured to a chair near his desk, one that was clearly built for someone human-sized. Rebecca sat carefully, her mind racing. A mistranslation? Or a deliberate lie? Tell me about your face, Vraxis said, and Rebecca's hand flew automatically to her scars. But he continued before she could respond. Those marks. They speak of fire and pain. Of survival. How did you earn them? Earn them? It was an accident. A reactor coolant leak. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And you lived. Vraxis leaned forward, his amber eyes intense. You faced fire and lived. Among my people, such marks are badges of honor. They show strength, survival, the will to continue when death reached for you. They are considered beautiful. Beautiful. Rebecca had not heard that word applied to her in 3 years. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Your people do not see it this way, Vraxis observed. It wasn't a question. He saw too much. No, Rebecca admitted quietly. They don't. Then your people are fools. Over the next few days, Rebecca discovered that her quarters were in the residential section of Vraxis's flagship, not far from his own rooms. Her space was large and comfortable, with furniture size for humans and a viewport that showed the stars. A Krithari female named Thala, one of the ship's engineers, stopped by to introduce herself and offer help if Rebecca needed anything. Rebecca started exploring, expecting to be stopped or confined, but nobody prevented her from wandering. She found observation decks, training rooms, and eventually the engineering section. Her fingers itched looking at the systems. They were different from human designs but followed logical patterns she could understand. A young Krithari engineer noticed her studying a power distribution panel and approached with what she was learning to recognize as friendly curiosity. "You understand this?" "Some of it," Rebecca admitted. "The flow patterns are elegant. More efficient than our systems. But I think there might be a harmonic issue in the tertiary coupling here." The engineer, who introduced himself as Vorik, stared at her. Then he pulled up a diagnostic display. His eyes widened. "You are correct. We have been chasing intermittent fluctuations for weeks. How did you see this?" Rebecca shrugged. "It's what I did back home." Word spread quickly. Within 2 days, engineers were asking her opinion on various systems. Within a week, she was working alongside them, tools in hand, doing what she'd always loved. Nobody commented on her scars except to ask if the burns had affected her manual dexterity. When she proved they hadn't, that was the end of it. Vraxis watched all of this with quiet approval. He started inviting her to evening meals in his quarters, just the two of them, talking about everything from engineering to colony life to the strange misunderstanding that had brought her here. He was educated, thoughtful, and surprisingly funny in a dry way that caught her off guard. And he kept looking at her like she was the most interesting person he'd ever met. One evening, as they sat watching stars stream by the viewport, Vraxis spoke quietly. "The Valorians lied to both our peoples, Rebecca Foster. But perhaps something good has come from their deception. You are exactly the kind of mind and spirit we value. The Krithari do not judge by appearance. We judge by capability, by honor, by the strength within." Rebecca touched her scars without thinking. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel the need to hide them. "I think I'm starting to understand that," she said softly. Vraxis's rumbling laugh filled the room, warm and genuine. "Good. Because I find I very much enjoy your company. And I think, Rebecca Foster, you are exactly where you were meant to be." The breakthrough came during a routine maintenance shift in the shield generator room. Rebecca had been working with the engineering team for 3 weeks now, and they'd started trusting her instincts. Vorik called her down because something felt off, even though all the diagnostics showed green across the board. Rebecca ran her hands along the power conduits, feeling the vibrations. It was an old habit from her early days as an apprentice, back when her mentor taught her that sometimes your hands knew things before the computers did. The hum wasn't quite right. Too much resonance in the secondary systems. "Pull up the harmonic frequency charts for the last month," she told Vorik. He did, and they both stared at the display. There it was. A pattern so subtle the automated systems missed it completely. The shield harmonics were drifting out of sync by tiny fractions, but those fractions were building. In another 2 weeks, maybe 3, there would have been a cascade failure. In the middle of a battle, that would mean death for everyone on board. "How did you find this?" Vorik breathed. "Our best systems analysts missed it." Rebecca shrugged, uncomfortable with the awe in his voice. "Sometimes you just have to feel it. The math is important, but so is intuition." Word reached Vraxis within the hour. He came down to engineering himself, something that made the entire crew stand straighter. He examined Rebecca's findings with those intense amber eyes, then looked at her with something she was learning to recognize as deep respect. "You may have saved this ship and everyone on it," he said simply. "The Council should hear of this. And I think it is time you understood the full truth of what the Valorians have done." That evening, Vraxis invited Rebecca to his private office. The walls lit up with star charts and intelligence reports. He poured her something that tasted like spiced tea, then began to explain. The Valerian Empire had been expanding aggressively for decades, using a simple strategy. They'd approach smaller species, offer protection from supposed threats, then slowly drain those species of resources while painting anyone who resisted as dangerous aggressors. They'd done it to the Nethril, the Quillith, and half a dozen others. Now they were doing it to humanity. The attacks you heard about. Vraxis pulled up footage of damaged stations. "Those were not our doing. We arrived after Valerian raids to provide aid. They documented our rescue ships and called them invasion forces. They are very skilled at controlling the narrative." Rebecca felt sick. But why? What do they gain? Control. Resources. Power. Vraxis's scales darkened with anger. Humanity is new to this region of space. Young species are easy to manipulate. They make you afraid, then position themselves as your only salvation. Meanwhile, they slowly take everything you have. He showed her more evidence. Communication intercepts. Financial records. Testimony from other species who'd escaped Valian control. The pattern was undeniable and horrifying. We have been trying to make contact with human colonies directly, Vraxis continued. To warn them. But the Valorians control most communication channels in your space. Messages are blocked or altered. The few that get through are dismissed as enemy propaganda. That's why you accepted their offer of a liaison, Rebecca said, understanding clicking into place. You hope to reach humanity through whoever they sent. Yes. Though I expected someone who knew they were a diplomat, not a sacrifice. His voice gentled. I am sorry for what they did to you, Rebecca. Sorry that your own people treated you as disposable. Rebecca stared at her hands, at the scars that marked her as unwanted back home. I'm not surprised they chose me. I was convenient. The damaged girl nobody would miss. Then they are blind. Vraxis moved to sit across from her, his massive form somehow not intimidating in the dim light. In the weeks you have been here, you have proven yourself invaluable. Your mind sees patterns others miss. Your hands create solutions where none existed. And your heart refuses to break despite every reason it should. He paused, and something shifted in his expression. Among the Krithari, we have a saying. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. You have been tested by fire, Rebecca Foster, and you emerged stronger. That is rare. That is precious. That is beautiful. There was that word again. Beautiful. Rebecca met his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity there. I need to tell them, she said suddenly. New Haven. The other colonies. They need to know the truth. The Valorians will block any transmission you send. Then we go around them. Rebecca's engineering mind was already working. Every colony has emergency beacons. Old systems from the founding days that operate on different frequencies. They are supposed to be for disasters, but this qualifies. If I can access one remotely, I can piggyback a message through the entire network before they realize what's happening. Vraxis leaned forward, interested. Can you do this? Maybe. Probably. I helped install some of those systems on New Haven. I know the backdoor access protocols. She grinned, feeling alive in a way she hadn't in years. They never bothered to change them because nobody thought they mattered. Over the next week, Rebecca worked with Vorik and the communications team to build a transmission package. They gathered evidence, compiled it into a format humans could understand, and prepared a message from Rebecca herself. She recorded it sitting in her quarters, looking directly at the camera. My name is Rebecca Foster. New Haven Colony sent me to the Krithari as tribute to monsters. But I found something else here. I found the truth. She laid it all out. The mistranslation. The evidence of Valian manipulation. The pattern of how they operated. And she told them about the Krithari, about their honor and their desire for genuine alliance, not subjugation. I know this sounds impossible, she said to the camera. I know they taught us to fear these people. But I've lived among them. Worked beside them. And I'm telling you, we've been lied to. The real threat isn't the one they want us to see. When she finished recording, Vraxis watched it in silence. Then he looked at her with something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Or something deeper. You understand this will make you a target, he said quietly. The Valorians will call you a traitor. Your own people may hate you for this. Rebecca thought about her parents, about the council, about everyone who'd looked through her like she didn't exist. They already threw me away once. I've got nothing left to lose. You have us, Vraxis said, and the certainty in his voice made her chest tight. You have me. Whatever comes, you will not face it alone. The transmission went out 3 days later, piggybacking through every emergency beacon in human space. By the time the Valorians realized what was happening and started shutting down systems, the message had already reached 40 colonies. Rebecca sat beside Vraxis in his office, watching the communication channels light up with responses. Some angry. Some confused. Some grateful. We did it, she whispered. Vraxis's hand, massive and scaled, settled gently on her shoulder. No, Rebecca. You did this. You built the bridge we could not. You saved your people from a trap they did not see. She looked up at him and realized with sudden clarity that somewhere between the engineering deck and these quiet evenings, she'd stopped being afraid. Stopped feeling broken. Started feeling like maybe she belonged somewhere after all. And that somewhere was right here. The response to Rebecca's transmission hit like a shockwave across human space. Within 48 hours, 3 colonies had formally requested direct communication with the Krithari Dominion. Within a week, protests erupted on New Haven demanding answers from Governor Hayes and the council. People wanted to know why they'd been lied to. Why they'd sent an innocent woman to what they thought was certain death. But the Valyrian Empire didn't sit quietly while their carefully constructed narrative fell apart. Ambassador Kelris arrived at Vraxis's flagship with a battle group. Not enough ships to start a real fight, but enough to make a point. He demanded an immediate meeting, and Vraxis agreed, though Rebecca could see the tension in his scales. They darkened when he was angry, shifting from blue-purple to almost black. "You should stay in your quarters," Vraxis told her. "Kelris will be looking for leverage. I will not give him the satisfaction of using you." But Rebecca shook her head. "I'm the one who sent that message. I'm not hiding now." Something fierce and proud flashed in Vraxis's eyes. "Then you stand beside me. As an equal. As my partner in this." The word partner hit her differently than she expected, warm and solid in her chest. She nodded and followed him to the meeting chamber. Kelris looked exactly as Rebecca remembered. That smooth face, that practiced smile, those cold eyes that calculated value in everything they saw. When he spotted Rebecca standing next to Vraxis, his expression flickered with surprise before settling back into diplomatic neutrality. "Miss Foster. I'm relieved to see you're unharmed. Your family has been quite worried." Rebecca nearly laughed. "Really? Because they signed the papers sending me here without even saying goodbye." "A difficult choice made for the greater good," Kelris said smoothly. "But circumstances have changed. The council has authorized me to negotiate your return. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation to the Krithari for any inconvenience." "She is not property to be traded," Vraxis rumbled, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "Of course not," Kelris agreed, though his tone suggested he thought exactly that. "Which is why we're asking Miss Foster directly. Rebecca, don't you want to come home? To see your parents again? To return to your own people?" For just a moment, Rebecca felt a pull. Home. The word still meant something, even after everything. She thought about the little apartment she'd had, the coffee shop on the corner, the view of the colony gardens from the engineering bay. Then she thought about her mother's face when the council voted. Her father's absence at the landing pad. The way people looked through her like she was invisible. "This is my home now," she said clearly. "These are my people. And I'm not going anywhere." Kelris's smile thinned. "I see. How unfortunate. You realize, of course, that your transmission violated several treaties regarding information security. The Valyrian Empire is prepared to file formal charges of espionage and treason against New Haven Colony unless you return to face justice." "Justice?" Rebecca's voice rose. "You lied to my entire species. You manipulated us into dependence. You painted the Krithari as monsters so we'd be too afraid to seek other allies. And you're talking about justice. Careful, Miss Foster. You're making very serious accusations against the sovereign government." "I have evidence," Rebecca shot back. "Financial records. Communication intercepts. Testimony from 6 other species your empire has exploited the same way. Should I send another transmission? Make it all public?" Kelris's mask finally cracked. Anger flashed across his face, quick and vicious. "You stupid girl. You have no idea what you've done. The protection we offered your colonies was real. There are threats out here that would swallow humanity whole. Without us, you're vulnerable." "Without you, we're free to make our own alliances," Vraxis interjected. "Based on truth rather than manipulation. The Krithari offer genuine partnership. Not the slow strangulation you call protection. The council will never agree to break from Valyrian oversight. They're not fools." "No," Rebecca agreed. "But they're not yours anymore either. I'm in direct contact with 7 council members who want answers. Real answers. And more colonies are reaching out every day. You don't control the narrative anymore, Kelris. That's why you're really here. You're losing your grip." The ambassador stood, his diplomatic facade completely gone now. "This isn't over. The Empire doesn't forget betrayal. And neither does New Haven. Your parents have publicly disowned you, Miss Foster. You're a traitor to your own kind. You'll never be welcome in human space again." The words should have hurt more than they did. Maybe a month ago they would have. But standing here beside Vraxis, with her engineering team waiting outside, with Thala who taught her Krithari cooking and Vorik who'd become a genuine friend, Rebecca found she didn't care. "Then I guess it's good I found a better family," she said simply. Kelris left without another word, his battle group departing within the hour. But Rebecca knew it wasn't really over. The Valorians had too much invested in controlling human space to give up easily. She was right. 2 days later, alarms screamed through the flagship. 3 Valorian strike ships had bypassed the perimeter and were making a run directly at Vraxis's vessel. They weren't firing on the ship itself. They were targeting the docking bays, trying to disable the hangar systems. "They're coming for you," Vraxis realized, already moving. "They're going to try to take you by force." Rebecca's mind raced. The Valorians couldn't win a straight fight, so they were going for a quick extraction. Grab her, jump to faster than light speed, and disappear before the Krithari could respond. Make it look like a rescue. Discredit everything she'd said by parading her around as a hostage they'd saved. "The hangar bay control systems," she said suddenly. "They run through the secondary computer core. If I can get there, I can reroute power and disable their docking override." "Too dangerous. We have soldiers who can." "Your soldiers don't know human override codes," Rebecca interrupted, already running. "I do. I can stop them, but I have to do it now." She heard Vraxis shouting orders behind her, heard his heavy footsteps as he followed. The corridors were chaotic with crew members running to battle stations. Rebecca dodged between them, her smaller size an advantage for once, her feet carrying her on pure memory to the computer core. The door was already open. 2 Valerian soldiers in boarding armor stood inside, working frantically at the console. They'd gotten farther than Rebecca expected. Another 30 seconds and they'd have control of the entire docking system. Rebecca didn't think. She grabbed a heavy tool from a nearby maintenance kit and hurled it at the nearest soldier's helmet. It connected with a satisfying crack. As he stumbled, she dove for the console, her fingers flying across the controls. The second soldier reached for her, but then Vraxis was there. His roar shook the room. The soldier tried to bring his weapon up, but Vraxis moved with terrifying speed for something so large. One swipe of his clawed hand and the soldier went down. Rebecca's fingers never stopped moving. She keyed in her old maintenance codes from New Haven, the ones that worked on similar human systems. The console chimed acceptance. She rerouted power flow, shut down docking protocols, and for good measure, locked the Valerian ships out of their own override systems. "Got them," she gasped. "They're locked out. They can't dock and they can't control our systems." On the view screen, the Valerian ships hesitated, then broke off and jumped away. The entire attack had lasted less than 5 minutes. Rebecca sagged against the console, adrenaline making her hands shake. Vraxis was beside her instantly, checking for injuries, his concern so obvious it made her heart ache. "I'm okay," she assured him. "I'm okay." His hand cupped her scarred cheek, so gentle despite the claws. "You could have been killed. You should have let my warriors handle this. They would have been too late. You know they would have." "I know." His amber eyes held hers. "You saved us again, Rebecca Foster. And you nearly stopped my heart doing it." Something in his voice, in the way he looked at her, made the words spill out before she could stop them. "I wasn't going to let them take me away from you." Vraxis went very still. "From us. From the crew." "From you," Rebecca repeated, more certain now. "Especially from you." The moment stretched between them, charged and fragile. Then Vraxis's rumbling voice went soft. "Among my people, there is a bonding ceremony. It joins 2 lives as partners in all things. I had not spoken of it because I did not wish to presume. But Rebecca, you have become precious to me. More than I thought possible." Rebecca's throat tightened. "You're asking me to stay. Officially. I am asking you to be mine, as I wish to be yours. If you will have a dragon lord who failed to protect you from harm." She laughed, tears pricking her eyes. "You got here pretty fast for someone who failed. Is that a yes?" Rebecca reached up, touching the scales on his face, marveling that she was no longer afraid. That she'd found love in the last place anyone would have expected. "Yes," she whispered. "It's a yes." 6 months changed everything. Rebecca stood in the observation deck of Vraxis's flagship, watching New Haven grow larger in the viewport. The colony looked exactly the same as the day she'd left, but she was different. The woman who'd boarded that transport with nothing but a toolkit and broken hope wouldn't recognize who she'd become. The bonding ceremony had been 3 months ago. Krithari traditions were beautiful in their simplicity. She and Vraxis had stood before his crew, exchanged vows of partnership and protection, and sealed the bond with marks on their hands. Rebecca wore a silver band now that carried a tiny etching of Krithari script. It translated to chosen heart, and every time she looked at it, something warm bloomed in her chest. The colonies had been busy too. After the failed Valyrian kidnapping attempt, 4 more human settlements broke away from the Empire's protection agreements. They wanted direct talks with the Krithari, wanted to see the evidence for themselves. Governor Hayes, facing massive pressure from her own people, finally agreed to a formal diplomatic summit on New Haven. Which was why Rebecca was going home. Not as a sacrifice this time. As an ambassador. "You are nervous," Vraxis observed, moving to stand beside her. Even after months together, his size still impressed her. But now it felt comforting rather than intimidating. "A little," Rebecca admitted. "I know what to expect from your people. Mine are unpredictable. They will see what I see. A woman of strength and brilliance who changed the course of history." Rebecca snorted. "Some of them will see a traitor with a scarred face who ran off with aliens. Then they are still fools." Vraxis's hand found hers, his scaled fingers interlacing with her smaller ones. "And their opinions matter less than dust in space." The landing pad was crowded when they arrived. News crews, curious colonists, and half the council had turned out. Rebecca spotted Governor Hayes looking significantly less confident than she had 6 months ago. Council member Burton stood beside her, the man who'd first suggested sending Rebecca away. He wouldn't meet her eyes. But there were friendly faces too. Engineers from her old department holding welcome signs. Neighbors from her apartment building. And in the back, trying to stay inconspicuous, her parents. Rebecca's stomach twisted at the sight of them, but she kept her expression neutral. She had a job to do. Vraxis descended the ramp first, and the crowd went silent. He was impressive in his formal armor, every inch the warrior commander. But when Rebecca stepped out beside him, wearing clothes that blended Krithari and human styles, wearing her scars openly without shame, the whispers started. Governor Hayes stepped forward, her smile strained. "Commander Vraxis. Miss Foster. Welcome to New Haven. We're pleased to host this historic summit." "We are honored by the invitation," Vraxis replied formally. Then his tone warmed as he looked at Rebecca. "And my partner is pleased to return to her birthplace, even briefly." The word partner made several people in the crowd shift uncomfortably. Rebecca ignored them. She'd spent too long caring what these people thought. The summit lasted 3 days. Rebecca presented evidence alongside Vraxis, showing the patterns of Valyrian manipulation in clear, undeniable detail. She brought testimony from other species who'd escaped similar traps. She showed financial records proving how the Valorians drained resources while providing minimal actual protection. And she told her own story. How she'd been sent as a sacrifice and found a home instead. How the Krithari valued capability over appearance, honor over social status, truth over comfortable lies. "They didn't see me as damaged or disposable," she said to the assembled council and colonists. "They saw me as useful. As worthy. As someone with value beyond my face." Some people listened. Some didn't want to hear it. But the evidence was overwhelming, and even the skeptics couldn't deny the math. The Valorians had been bleeding humanity dry, and everyone had been too afraid to notice. On the second day, her mother approached her during a break. Margaret Foster looked older than Rebecca remembered, more uncertain. "Rebecca, I wanted to talk." "No," Rebecca interrupted gently. "I don't think there's anything to say. You made your choice 6 months ago. I've made mine since then. We thought we were protecting you. The council said you'd be an ambassador. You didn't fight for me, Mom. You didn't even try." Rebecca kept her voice level. "You were relieved to have me gone. Don't rewrite history now that things worked out." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. Your father and we've made mistakes." "You have. And I've forgiven you, because carrying anger takes too much energy." Rebecca touched her grandmother's necklace, the one piece of home she'd kept. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean I need you in my life anymore." She walked away before her mother could respond. It hurt less than she'd expected. Maybe because she'd already grieved the loss of that relationship months ago. Her father never approached at all. But others did. Old colleagues from engineering asked about her work with the Krithari. Young women with scars of their own thanked her quietly for showing them that damage didn't mean worthless. A teenage girl with a prosthetic arm told Rebecca she was her hero. That conversation made Rebecca cry later, in the privacy of her quarters on the flagship. On the final day of the summit, New Haven formally voted to establish an independent alliance with the Krithari Dominion. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. 3 other colonies announced they'd be holding similar votes within the month. The Valyrian Empire issued formal protests and threatened economic sanctions. Nobody seemed particularly worried. Turned out there were lots of species willing to trade with humans once the Valorians didn't control access. Governor Hayes made one last attempt as they prepared to leave. "Miss Foster, there's been talk of you returning to New Haven. Establishing a permanent liaison office here. You'd have full diplomatic status, housing, whatever resources you need." Rebecca glanced at Vraxis, who stood silently beside her. His expression was neutral, but she could read the tension in his scales. He'd support whatever choice she made, but he didn't want her to go. Neither did she. "Thank you for the offer," Rebecca said. "But my work is with the Dominion fleet. We're making contact with other human colonies, establishing trade agreements, building partnerships. I'm needed there. You're also needed here. This is your home." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "This was where I was born. Home is somewhere else now." As their ship lifted off, Rebecca watched New Haven shrink in the viewport. She felt lighter somehow, like she'd put down a weight she'd been carrying for years. Vraxis found her there an hour later, staring at the stars. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "Not even one." She leaned into his side, marveling at how natural it felt. "I was thinking about what you said when we first met. About scars being beautiful because they show survival. I remember. I spent 3 years hating these scars. Hating what they represented. Hating how people looked at me." She traced the marks on her face absently. "But you were right. They're part of my story. Part of what made me strong enough to do all this." Vraxis's arm wrapped around her shoulders. "You were always strong. The scars simply made it visible." Rebecca turned to face him, rising up on her toes so she could reach. He bent down to meet her, and they shared a kiss that tasted like homecoming and promise. "I love you," she whispered against his scales. "My dragon lord." His rumbling laugh vibrated through her. "And I love you, my fierce little engineer. My partner. My home." Behind them, the stars stretched infinite and bright. Ahead of them, a dozen colonies waited to be visited, hundreds of partnerships to be forged, and a future neither of them could have imagined 6 months ago. Rebecca Foster, the ugly daughter nobody wanted, had found exactly where she belonged. Not despite her scars, but because of everything they represented about her courage, her resilience, and her refusal to break. She'd been given to a dragon lord as punishment. And she'd found a love that saw her true beauty all along. The kind of beauty that had nothing to do with mirrors and everything to do with the strength of her heart. "Retry,"